Hi, I'm Lawrence, and in this video I'll show you how to get started on the X-TAON art car contest. In this contest you're tasked with texturing a pre-modeled and pre-unwrapped car in an art car style with Substance Painter. So first off, I'll show you how to download Substance Painter. So you go to the algorithmic.com website and then you click on the Download By button. Once that page loads up, you'll see at the top here, Substance Painter is listed, and you can click whatever platform you want to download. So we've got Windows, Mac, and Linux. I'll click Windows, and it prompts me to log in with my account. So once I've done that, it will download the Substance Painter trial version. Now then, if you want to download the mesh and you haven't done that yet, you can either click the link below this video, or you can click on Community, Blog, and find the X-TAON Art Car Contest link down there. Once you've got those two things, you can start up Substance Painter right here, and I've got my mesh in a folder here together with some reference material and other things, and we'll get started on that now. So I'll show you how to do that. You click File, New, and we need to select a mesh, so you do that with the Select button here, and then I'm going to go to the folder I've saved it and select the FBX here. It might have a different name in the final version. Click Open. Then I make sure I'm on the PBR Metallic Roughness template. You can choose another one if you know what you're doing. Absolutely make sure that import cameras is on. That's important for the competition. I'm going to change my document resolution to 2K. I can go to 4K later if I want to. And once I'm happy with that, I'll click OK, and it's going to load my mesh up in a short instant. So make sure I'm in 3D view, rotate it around, and there you can see this is my my mesh. The cameras I just imported, they're in here. The final version will have a few more. You need to use these for your final renders. And the first thing I like to do when I get started is I'd like to bake the textures, so I get that part sort of over with. Now you need to understand as well that we have a few different texture sets here, so we're going to bake them for all of them. If I hit solo, you can see that the body is split up into a few different parts. This is sort of the extras. We've got this glass, tires, and the wheels. So to bake my textures, I need to go to the texture set settings, scroll down a bit, and click Bake Mesh Maps. I'm going to click that. And I don't have an actual high poly, so I'm going to click Use Low Poly as High Poly Mesh here. And I'm going to turn off the thickness because you probably don't need that for a car. All the rest might have some use when you're going to work with it. The output size, I'll set that a bit higher. I'll choose 4K in this case. You can go even higher, but be warned, the baking might take a long time depending on your computer. And the final thing I want to do, and this is quite important for later in our video, is I'm going to go into Position. And for the position, I want the normalization scale, so that's sort of the range the position map uses, to be set for the full scene. So I'll click Full Scene, and then super important, make sure that you click Apply to All. Otherwise, you're only setting it for the body A that we're baking here. So I'll set it to Full Scene. Finally, what you can also do is you can set up a bit of anti-aliasing here. I'm not going to do that because it's high resolution, but if you want full quality, set it to something like 8 and get a coffee or eat lunch or something. And then I'll click Bake All Texture Sets, and I'll pause the video and we'll return once it's done. So after a few minutes, my bakes are done. Let me just set this back to turn all the texture sets on, and we can get started setting up some shaders for this model here. So to set the shaders up, you should open the texture set list, and you can see that next to every texture set a shader is listed. They're all using the main shader. So there's two shaders I want. I would like the glass to be opaque so I can see through the headlights, see through the glass, see through the rear lights. And I would like body A and B, which is the car paint body, to have a car paint shader with a coating. So we'll start with the glass. I'll click on the main shader, and I'll click New Shader Instance to make a new shader there to change it. Then I'll click this little ball here, which is the shader settings, and I'll rename this one to Glass Shader so I can tell it apart. Click the drop down here to choose a new shader, and we're going to go for this one here, the one that's sort of fading away, which if you hover over it is PBR Metal Rough with Alpha Blending. So I'll click that. And that's all there is to it. Just chosen a new shader. What I should do now is go back into the texture set list settings, make sure I've got the glass selected with the glass shader, and I'm going to add an opacity channel to that so I can control the transparency. So click plus here and choose opacity, and you see a new opacity channel pops in at the bottom there. Then for the glass, I'm going to go into my layers, create a new fill layer, and I'm going to start setting this up. So I want my glass to be fairly dark. I would like it to be very reflective, something like that, almost maximum. And then here's the key one. I want to reduce the opacity to something like, let's see, let's pick 0.7 or something like that. And you can see through the headlights and see all of that going on now. So it's a case of choosing a new shader and then making sure you're using that extra channel or those settings from that shader. We'll do the same thing for the car paint. So going to texture set settings, I'll click body A. Click on main shader, and I can choose the glass shader, but I want a new one here. So I'll click new shader instance. Go into these settings here. We'll call this one car paint coated, so I can tell it apart. And then I'm going to go for the PBR coated one. I know there's a car paint one, but I prefer this one because it doesn't have the metallic flakes. So it works in, there's a base layer, which has a normal roughness. It's just regular paint. And then on top, there's an extra transparent coating. So you've got 2 layers of roughness going on. So click that. Click here. And you can see that for the coat layer, I have an extra control for roughness. So one roughness is controlled by the map, and then there's a coat layer on top. And you can see with this, you can see what the opacity of the coat layer is. And I can actually also even change the opacity of it to modify what it looks like. And there's an IOR setting. It's all quite interesting. And there's even a subsurface scattering if I would like to, but I'm going to turn that off since this is not a skin or anything. And so once I've done that, you can see that for my car paint, I've got this big bright highlight for the bottom layer that's going on. And I can even quickly show you that in the layers here. If I create a new layer, set this to red, for example, you see that I've got that big highlight at the bottom here, which I can control with the roughness like so. And then there's that coating that appears over the top of it. So that's my my standard shader setup. And let me just get rid of this. We'll build it up properly in a moment. So what rests is to set up the shader for body B here. So select body B and choose car paint coated. That's done. Now what I'd like to do is to get a little bit of a head start with some pre-created materials. I don't want to create everything from scratch. Easiest way is to click on the Substance source button here, and that opens up the source browser. Make sure you log in once it's loaded. I'm already logged in, so I'm good to go. And if you want to get the assets that are released for free for this competition, you search for X-TAON Art Car Contest. Now this isn't working yet in my case because I'm doing this before the assets are released. You can also click free assets, or if you have credits like I do, you can search for specific assets. So one of the assets that will be available is the carbon twill. So I'll show you how to get that. You search for the asset and then you click this little download button here. It's going to start loading, and in a quick moment it's going to be added to Substance Painter. So I'll do that a few more times. And then once you have these assets in here, you can load them up in your mesh. If you'd like to find these a little bit easier, what you can do is search for automotive in your shelf, and it'll show you all the ones that are tagged automotive, including the HDRI Studio that you're supposed to use. If you've done that, you can click this button here to make a new subshelf for what you have selected, so you can easily access these materials. So for example, we'll drop this one in, and it will load up the HDR so that we can view it with the proper settings already. Now what we're going to do is we'll start off with the tires that we have here. So I'm going to select the texture set for the tires, like so, and I'll take these summer tires that I have, and I'm going to drop them into my stack, like so. There we go. So the tires are loaded up, but they're not mapped correctly. You can see that this looks off. So let's go into the 2D view by hitting F3, and you can see that these tires are repeating 4 times, so we'll have to change the tiling a little bit. So I've got this layer selected. I'll turn off this scale over here. I'll set it to repeat 4 times from top to bottom. And I have to offset them a little bit. I can do that manually by just hitting Shift and moving them like this. And actually it's 1/8, so I could also type in 0.125 like that. Now I'm still getting not enough repetition from left to right, so I can change that as well. So let's set that to 4. There you go. Jump back to my 3D view, and you can see I've got my tire repeating here. So a few more tweaks I can do. I'll turn on height just to make it a little bit stronger, and actually turn off normal instead because I have more control that way. And then in the pattern parameters here, I can do a few things like set the tire side size like so. I can make it wrap nicely around the corner. like that, and my tire is pretty much good to go. I have a few more things I can change. For example, the roughness, I can make it a bit rougher. I'll probably make it a little bit smoother to get new tires going on. And so next up, we'll jump to another material. In this case, the body C, so I'll go to body C. And just to make it a bit easier, I'll set it to solo, so I can only see that one. And I'm going to set up a few materials here. First thing I want to do is make a simple material that blocks the interior here. So create a new fill layer. I'll set that to fully black. And I'll also make sure that my roughness is very rough. And I'll add a mask with color selection. And as a pick color, I'll go for this black stuff here, like that. And let's see, change the tolerance a bit. There we go. So it appears about everywhere. And then I'd like to add some carbon fiber to the side. So this part here is the carbon fiber on the side. So I'm going to grab my carbon fiber that I brought in earlier, drop it on the top, like so. And I need to change a few more settings to get it to show up properly right now. So what I should do is first make sure I add a mask with color selection again. And I'm going to pick a color and I'm going for that blue so it appears everywhere. And then I'm going to tweak this material a bit again to get it to show up properly. So what I'll do is jump into the carbon fiber and I'll find the roughness value, make it a bit rougher like that. And also I'll have to tile it some more. This is really, really big, so let's try a value of 8. There we go, that seems to work. I'm getting that nice repetition on my carbon fiber. And I'm going to go back and turn all my other sets back on. So turn on all. There we go. Now you can see that carbon fiber. Now I've got a little bit of a problem here. I'll probably have to tweak the color selection map a bit more. So let's change the tolerance like that. There we go. That works a little bit better already. And there's a few more we can add. Like for example, I would like to add some chrome in here. So I'm going to do the same thing again, grab a chrome material, or I can actually create one myself by adding a fill layer, like so. Set the metallic to maximum, set the roughness pretty low, and set this fairly high to get a kind of chrome going on. And then we'll add a black mask, and this black mask I'm going to be painting and selecting things. So again, I'd like this to be a little bit easier to see, so I'll solo it. And I'd like to select most of the interior parts of the lighting. And in this case, I'll do it differently. I'll use the polygon select tool. So I'll set it to select objects. And I'll be painting white. So I'm going to select this whole thing here, like that, to paint it white. Make sure I get everything that's supposed to come along with it, like that. Do the other side as well. Like that, select all of these things, and I can actually select too much, and if I just press X to swap it around, I can deselect by painting with black. So I actually don't want any of it on there, and that center line should work. So switch back to paintbrush, and that gives me a better idea of what it's looking like exactly. So I'll turn everything on again. There we go. That's my my setup for the basic materials. I'd also like to get a license plate going on here. So I've brought in a license plate material, and the license plate is located in body A. So just to show you again, the two license plates are located here and there. So I'm going to do this in the 2D view. I'll take the license plate and I'll drop it in like that. Give it a little bit of time, and right now it's just positioned everywhere. And with this license plate, it's actually going to be easier for me to just manually transform this into place like that, and then just manually scale this around so I can get that to match up correctly. A little more. Zoom in a bit, make it a bit higher. And squash that a bit. Yeah, that's about right. Now, problem is this license plate is repeating everywhere. So I can go in here in the fill layer, and I can set the tiling to none. And that means it won't repeat anywhere, and I'm only going to be seeing it on that specific section. And I need to do a second one, obviously. So to do that, I'll just duplicate this layer. I'll call it, let's see, we'll rename this to license plate 1. I'll right click, and I will say duplicate layer. There we go. Duplicate. So I've got a copy now, and I'll rename this one to license plate 2. Once I have that, I can take this license plate, I'll turn it around 180 degrees, and then with shift I'll drag it up to get it into the correct spot right over there. And this one seems to be slightly smaller, so I'll scale it around a bit. There we go, that looks about right. The one problem we have is that it's overriding the colors around there, so I'll just create a folder to put the license plates in. Select both of them like so, drop them in, and then I'm going to mask out this folder so that it only appears on these specific UV islands. So I've got that folder. I'll say add black mask, choose the polygon select tool again, and this time I'm going to go for UV islands. Set it to white, and then select these 2 UV islands to mask the map out so that it only appears on those specific UV islands. And let's go back to this view. There we go. I've got my license plate assigned. So let's finish this up. We've got the license plate done. Let's add another material below this, and I'll create a folder for that, and we'll call this one paint. In this paint, I'm going to drop the car solid paint like so. So the car solid paint is in there. And the interesting thing now with the solid paint is, well, what it's doing is it's giving you this sort of orange peel effect that's sitting below the surface. But the paint is only appearing on one part of the mesh, and I'd like it to appear on the rest as well. So a really nice trick you can do, and we're going to use this in a moment, is you can instantiate a layer across multiple texture sets. So I can right click this and say instantiate across texture sets. I'll say none, and right now it's on body A, and now body B is the second part. So I'll select body B, click OK, and just calculate. There we go, and now it's instantiated that across the other texture sets. And there's just a few things that remain for me to finish this up before I can start painting my body. Is I want some black in there as well. So I'll add a new fill layer like that. And I'm going to set this one to black like so. My roughness somewhere around there. And again, I'll do a black mask. I'm going to solo my textures like this, and I'll select out with the polygon select tool the parts that I don't want to appear in there. So this needs to all be black. Probably add some black to that, and we can switch to the UV shells like so to add some black in that part. Let's check, do we have everything? Yeah, that's about everything we want for this part. So I'll turn everything on again with all, switch back to this mode, and we'll call this one black fill. Okay, so now that we have that done, we can jump into the fun part of painting our body. So I've on purpose created this folder here that's instantiated, because that means I can create effects that procedurally get duplicated along the 2 different materials that I have here. I have to pay attention when I paint stuff. It won't be so obvious though. So I guess I'm going to start with painting a little bit, and I'll do that in a separate one. So I'll create a new layer here. It's a white fill layer, and I'm going to turn everything off except for the color, because all I want to do is add color. And let me call this painted like so. I'll add a black mask to it, and on this mask I can now start painting. And because it's an art car, I can go a little bit more crazy, and I quite like this laser impact one. So if I fire these, it adds these little streaks. Now I'm going to play with that a little bit. Let me see. First off, I want to make it a little bit bigger, and I want to make it quite a lot harder, like that. There we go. Play with that a little bit. Like so. Yep, that makes them a bit more obvious. And the next thing I would like is I'm going to turn on the lazy mouse, and I'm going to draw a line across the entire front here. And with the lazy mouse, I can do that just a little bit more precise, like so. And the part that I missed here, well, nothing lost. I can just go in, grab a hard brush, and turn off lazy mouse. Hotkey for that is D, and paint out the part that I could have missed, like so. There we go. Okay, so now I've got this on the front. I'd like to add it around the wheel arches as well. and I'm going to go back into my particles, select the laser impact again, and again change the hardness a little bit of that, bring it down. But now if I paint, let me quickly show that I draw here, I'm going to have to redo it completely on the other side. So it will be interesting to use some symmetry for that. So I'll hit undo to undo that, and then I'll turn on the symmetry here. And once the symmetry is activated, let me see, I have to choose which plane it's on. So show plane, there we go, shows me the plane, and this has been updated recently. And I want to mirror over the, let's see, Z axis. And I don't actually, I'd like to keep the plane though, because it shows me that it's on or not. And just a little part that's been missed here. So let me grab the eraser. Sorry, let me grab the brush. And I'm going to erase this here. Hard brush. There we go. I kind of spilt a little bit, so I get rid of that. Back to my particles, grab the laser impact. Make sure I'm painting white, make it a bit smaller, and make it a bit harder. And what's important with the laser impact is that it sort of fires from the view that you're looking at. So I'm going to, there we go, take a look around like that. Oh, I missed a little piece here, like that. And then here, change my view a little bit. There we go, to add that. So I've got these nice splashes running around, and with the symmetry on, if I go back to the other side, it's created an exact duplicate to the other side. So that sort of helps me not having to paint things twice. I'll go back into my brushes, grab the hard brush, make it a bit smaller. There we go, make it a bit smaller. Sometimes with the tablet it can be hard to, all right, paint this out. Just want to get that all white. Okay. Oops. And there's a little part that's been painted here. Just undo that a bit. Yeah, there we go. We missed a little section. There we go. And paint that out as well. Alright, and now we can turn symmetry off again, and we're good to go. So that's how you can paint with particles and with brushes. And so the painting is interesting, but sometimes it's a bit problematic if I want to get things to go across. It's a bit tricky right now, so I'm going to use some procedural effects because that's what Painter is really strong in. So I'm going to go back into my paint folder here that's instantiated. And I would like to use some special effects here, some generators. And I'd like to show you something else as well. So if I go onto the Substance website and I go to share.allegorithmic.com, you can also go there from the allegorithmic.com website and click on Community. Then here there is a site where the community shares their filters, their materials. It's a little less polished at times, but you can find some interesting things here. And I've created something myself. It's called the Directional Gradient for Painter. And this allows you to set a gradient with direction sliders. So you can do the same thing with the 3D linear gradient, but you have to set positions. This allows you to use the position sliders. So I can click download here, and once I get that, I'll have an SBSAR file. And I can then open that up. So I'm going to go in here, bring my window over. I'll go into the filters folder. I've downloaded a few. I found a halftone one is interesting, pixelate, lots of cool abstract things you can bring in here. So let's take this directional gradient and the halftone, bring that in. I'll drop it. And then Painter asks me what I would like to do with this. So I will say this is a generator, and the halftone I'm going to use as a filter. And I'm going to keep them for the current project. So I'll click import, and it brings the two of them in. So the generator has a proper thumbnail. The halftone doesn't have one. You can set that up by saying right click and then setting custom preview. It's always possible. And I'll show you what I want to do. I'm going to create a new fill layer here. So this, for example, this white paint, quite like that. And I'm going to add a black mask to that. And in the black mask, I'm going to right click and say add generator so that I can use this generator here. I'll drop it in. like so. And you see it gives me a fade from white to black now on there. But the cool thing is it does it over multiple layers at the same time. So I'm actually multiple texture sets at the same time. I'm actually only doing this on body A, but it does it on both of them at the same time. And then I've got some controls. I can start changing the direction. So for example, I can change the direction to be at the other side. And to really see the influence, I can change the contrast. There we go. If I set that up to maximum, I can now get this cool gradient to run across the car like that. And let me add a second one to that. I want to add a blue tint in between here. So I'm going to add a new fill layer. And again, I try to make sure to turn everything off except the color, because I'm only really doing color. And let's see, let's get some cool blue going on here like that. And I want the mask to be mostly the same, so I'll click add a black mask, and I can even copy this one. So I'll right click it, say copy mask, go to this guy here and say paste into mask. And now it's an exact duplicate. But if I select the generator and then play with the balance, so it works both ways. See, I can create a larger or a smaller version of it like that. And we try and find something like that. So usually this is a lot smoother. When I'm recording the screen, it's slightly laggy, but we can work with that. Set that up like so. Yeah, I quite like that. Okay, so that's pretty cool. Maybe we can change the angle a little bit even. Yeah, like that, to have it slightly different. Go back to this one and we'll change the angle a bit as well. I quite like that. I like an effect where it sort of splits up like that. Okay, and then for the white one, I want to make it a little bit more interesting. I would like to add some kind of streaking going out of it and maybe add some kind of abstract cellular camo thing in there. So we'll do two things. We'll replace the white one by a folder in which we can add multiple effects. So I'll add a folder, and to this folder I will add a black mask, and I'm going to transfer the mask by just saying copy mask and then paste into mask like that. Now I can just completely get rid of this mask by saying remove mask, and I'll drop that one in there like so. And now we're free to add some new effects in here. So for example, if I had a new fill layer and set it to color alone, and then make that a bit darker, like so. I can add another black mask, and this time we'll add a fill to the mask. So a fill is like a pattern fill layer. And I'm going to try and find a cool procedural for that. So I'm going to go to procedurals, and I know cells 4 here is pretty interesting. Drop that in. I get this kind of cellular type of effect going on, and I can play a little bit with the noise parameters. For example, with the scale, I can make it smaller and bigger. I actually want it to be a little bigger, so let's see. Yeah, that looks about right. I can play with the contrast, add a bit more contrast in that, and the balance as well, to sort of decide how much of it is covered and how much of it isn't. And maybe even break this up a bit more. You know that halftone filter we brought in? We can add that to these cells here. So I can right click and say add filter. Click here, and the halftone is right down there with the black thumbnail. Click that, and it adds this halftone effect to it, which is pretty interesting. You do notice a little bit that these cells are being cut off here. That's because of the UV mapping that they've got. So maybe we can change this to triplanar. There we go. Now they're triplanar projected over, and we don't have such clear UV seam issues anymore. Back into the halftone. Maybe change the resolution a bit. What about 100? Double it. Yep. And then for the position, scroll that around a bit. Yeah, I quite like that. Okay, so that's from my base pattern. Now I'd like to start breaking up this gradient a bit. So what I actually would like on this gradient, let me set the contrast down a bit again, maybe a bit more. I would like this transition area to have some streaks in there. So let's bring in another fill layer. We'll add a fill, and I'm going to grab those same cells in there like so. And I want them to be really squashed out and really contrasted. So set the contrast to maximum, like that. And again, we'll set them to triplanar projection. With the triplanar, I want them to be stretched out. So I have to stretch out this cube as well. So we'll change the scale. We'll make it a lot longer like that, and we'll make it smaller in both of these directions. And you have individual control over the length of these streaks, like that. See, so I've got these streaks running over. So I've scaled the triplanar projection, and then I will set this to overlay to sort of add that into the transition. So before I just had this gradient, and now I've got those things, those cells sort of spread in there. It needs a bit more contrast, so I can either add a levels to do that, or I can use a filter. And the filter I like is the histogram scan up here. It's similar to Designer if you've worked with it before, and I've got really nice sort of separate control to move these things so I can individually set where it transitions, and I have control of the contrast as well, so I can get some slight fades going on in there like that. So let's make a few more small improvements to this. One thing I would like to do is get this transition to be a little bit more interesting. So I'll add one more fill to it. I'll say add fill, and then drag this down below the histogram scan. And I want to use a grunge for it, something with like splashes or whatever. This one's interesting, so I'll drag that into the fill, like so. And let me set that to overlay as well. And it's much too small, so let's tile it 8 times or something, like that. And then we can play a bit with the balance to get it to show up more. We can play a bit with the with that. Play with the blend modes a bit to get this to show up in a proper way. Yeah, that's a little better. I like this. I like this a little more, how you can see a little bit more of it. Okay, once we've done that, I would like to also add a logo to the side. So let's do that. I'm going to create a new fill layer for that. And this time the logo I want to paint it onto the door. So I have to switch texture set to body B. Here we go, I'm on body B. And you can see the instance here. I can't modify this here. I have to go to the original one. So I'll create something on top of it, a white one. Set that to have a black mask. And again, make sure this layer is only doing color. There we go. And I'll simply use a brush with a specific alpha for that. So I'll go into my brushes. I'll choose basic hard. Scroll down to the alphas and let me search for a logo. Here we go, we've got the Substance logo. We'll choose that. Make this a bit bigger. And again, turn on symmetry so it's on both sides. And there we go. Add that logo to the side. And again, we can make the mask a bit more interesting if we add another fill to it. And in the same fill, we'll choose another grunge. What about the splashes again? Set them to 8. And then we'll modify the blend mode to subtract or something like that. Subtract, here we go. And play with the balance a bit. And the contrast. Alright, there we go. That's a little bit more interesting, I think. And now we should be ready to render it with iRay. To get started with iRay, you click on the top right here, this little camera button, and it opens up the iRay interface. First thing to point out is on this list at the top, you should see the cameras that are embedded in the file. We want you to at least render with camera 1 and 2, so that's the quarter front and the quarter back. Click that camera and the view changes. Now there's a few things to set up. In your case, the clear color here for the background might be disabled, so it would look a little bit like this. You can see the background. Now I don't think that's very nice, so if you tag this clear color checkbox here, you can choose a solid color to fill the background with. Next up, if you check this ground box, like I have, and you play a bit with the number for the Y height of the ground, I found that -125 is the magic number. You should set the ground to correctly align with the wheels like that. What you can also do, and if I switch to the 3D quarterback, you'll see that you can change the position of the environment that you're seeing. So in this case, the reflections aren't very nice. So if I go up to the environment, I can change the rotation, for example, 180 here. If I do that, see that the environment changes and the rotation is, and the reflections are much better aligned with the car that I'm seeing here. So I'll go back to my 3/4 front, set the rotation back to 0. You see how much nicer that looks? You get those crisp reflections. And then once you've done that, all that's left is to set up the render settings a little bit. So we recommend that you render with 2500 samples. I recommend to increase the time a bit as well. Setting it to 10 minutes should be more than enough for sure. Then next up, for the resolution, I'll click Override Viewport Resolution, and this allows you to render at a higher number. So for 4K, which we're asking, that's 3840 by, and give it some time to catch up, 2160 as a resolution. There we go. Once you've done that, you should be able to save this out. So click Save Render, and then save this render to disk. There you go. You repeat that for the 2 camera angles we require. Third one's a free angle, and then for anything more than those 3, you're free to do whatever you want. Different environment, different cameras, it's up to you. So that's about it for my video. I hope I've made you excited and shown you what you can do with Substance Painter. This is really a fun competition. There's so much you can do, and I can't wait to see what you're going to create and what you're going to amaze us with. Have fun, and bye.